and pleasure to introduce the moderator for the gender equality panel. I've known Katie for a number of years. We recently had a litigation together. Thankfully, we're on the same side. Katie is a partner at the Berger Singerman law firm here in town. She is a former prosecutor in Miami and Broward, near and dear to my heart. So we know she's good. She's a good lawyer, good training. She used to be, you may have seen her, she was a contributor to the Greta Van Susteren show on Fox News for many years. She is now a regular legal contributor on MSNBC. So I think Saturday mornings, usually, or any time now, it doesn't matter. Any day, you can turn it on and see Katie's likeness and see her giving great commentary on the state of our country and legal and political affairs. Katie is probably her most important job. She is the mother to a beautiful little girl named Charlotte, and sits on, I mean, God, how many boards? Every time I see there's an announcement that Katie is sitting on yet another board or involved with yet another organization, whether it be charitable, bar function, you name it, Katie is all over the place. And so it's hard to imagine how she keeps it all together. So when we thought of coming up with this gender equality panel, the first name that came to mind was Katie, because I could not think of anybody else who could moderate this panel any better than Katie. So with that, we're very happy to have her here. We know she travels all over the place, she talks all the time, but we're happy to have her. Katie Phang, everybody.
Thank you very much. If I could have my panelists please come up, that'd be wonderful. And again, welcome to, José please. Welcome to the inaugural Bast Amron Business Advantage Forum. We are launching today with a gender equality in the workplace panel. And we've got 5 amazing panelists that I've had the pleasure to interact with for a little bit going into today. But I wanted to introduce them starting from your left to the right. So we have José Sil. José is the president of Burger King brand at Restaurant Brands International, the indirect parent company of BKC. He began his career in 2000 at BKC as a senior attorney, and over the years has risen through increasing responsibility roles within the global operations function, and now is currently the president. So everybody welcome José Sil. Then we now have Adam Mopsick, who some of you already know. Adam's the principal and co-founder of Amicon Construction with over 25 years of experience in the construction and real estate industry. At the age of 24, he actually founded his own construction company, which was the basis for eventually Amicon Construction. Actually, I was driving here this morning and I saw Amicon Management, which is another arm of Amicon, which deals with owner representation for commercial and residential properties. And Adam is also, pardon me, Amicon is a boutique company that focuses on superior client experience and a unique corporate culture. So, ladies and gentlemen, Adam Mopsick. In the center of our stage, no less, is Nicole Shelley Greenidge Prattico. She has an impressive name, and it's meriting because she's an impressive woman. She's one of South Florida's most recognizable business icons, producing signature events, seminars, and workshops, and she fundraises millions of dollars for various causes in the public and the private sector, institutions, public officials, organizations. Her focus is on project and business development through strategic events management, public relations, and marketing, and she's been recognized as one of Caribbean Today's top 10 success stories in South Florida. Ladies and gentlemen, Nicole Shelley Greenidge Prattico. To Nicole's left is Johanna Mikkola. Johanna is the co-founder and CEO of WinCode. Oh, good, perfect. I just want to make sure I pronounced your name right, sorry. WinCode Academy, a leading technical school dedicated to training technologists with business acumen through best-in-class, accelerated, and immersive teaching methodologies. Johanna is an entrepreneur in residence for Babson College WinLab, and she sits on the advisory board of Emerge Americas. She was also selected in 2015 as an Endeavor Entrepreneur at the International Selection Panel in Amman, Jordan. Ladies and gentlemen, Johanna Mukala. And last and certainly not least is Donna Noche-Colaco. Donna is an independent retail consultant and member of the board of directors for Dover Saddlery Company. She was the brand president of White House Black Market and until just recently, which is in 2018. And prior to that position, Donna was the executive vice president of Loft Merchandising and Design of Ann Taylor Stores Corporation. Ladies and gentlemen, Donna Noche-Colaco. So as I advised the panelists, and by the way, it's funny because when they told me to moderate this, Dave and Jeff and Brett said, you're not going to be able to sit, you're going to have to stand, and we're going to do it, quote, Oprah style. So I was like, everybody gets a car today. Under your chair, you just figure out your envelope, you get it? Thanks, Bast Amron. I'll pick up my Tesla on the way out. The Matchbox, that's fine. Okay, so. At any point in time, I am going to try to leave some space. This is kind of a surprise for them. I am going to try to leave some time at the end for any questions that you might have for the panelists. But I am going to dive straight into the question to Jose, which they are expecting this question, but the rest of them they may not be expecting. So I wanted to ask each of the panelists how they define, quote, gender equality in their respective workplaces. And I also wanted to know from each of them, is it really as much of a hair on fire issue as we hear and we read about? Because that's kind of an important distinction with a difference, I think. So Jose, if you could take it.
Sure. You guys hear me? Okay, great. Good morning, everyone. A couple things before I jump into that question. I think first, wanted to let you guys know at Burger King we currently have styrofoam coffee cups. We're getting rid of them. We're in the process of eliminating those. We're addressing plastic lids, plastic straws. So it was great to hear from Dara and the work that Jeff's doing. So we're moving in that direction.
And you have veggie burgers too, I heard.
Yeah, that's another topic. We also have we also have the Bacon King and plenty of other products. Look, I'm from Miami originally. I grew up in a household where my mother was the it was a single family household. My parents divorced when I was when I was young. I was probably 10 years old, and so she worked 3 jobs to get us through school. Everybody in my household I had 2 sisters. My mom, our bird was a female. The dog was a female as well. So I grew up in that household, and as I was growing up and heading into college, she was my role model. My mom was the work ethic she had. So I was blind and kind of oblivious to gender inequality issues. All the way through college, even as I started to work. I think as I look now back over the years and I look at the role I have now, we're in 100 countries and territories. We have thousands of employees. We have actually more than 450,000 employees that work at Burger King around the world. It's an issue. It's a big issue. And I think the way I look at it is it's an issue that is going to preclude you from becoming, if you're in the business world, if you're in a law firm, however it is you kind of make your earning, if you don't have a mindset of having a diverse organization, a diverse leadership, a diverse workforce, you're going to be left behind. You're going to get left behind. And I think that's the way we look at it. Our vision and our dream for the company, for RBI, for BK, is to be the biggest and the best quick service restaurant brand in the entire world. We have a long way to go, but we're certain that to get there, we need to do it with great people, a diverse workforce, and having an equal and talented organization is what's going to help us get there. So that's my perspective on it. Is the issue hot? I think so. We have a very young workforce as well at RBI. We recruit quite a bit. About 100 plus new undergrads join the organization every year. And it's one of the top questions we get at the organization. People that we recruit, we go to the best schools in the country, we go to the best schools in the world. People want to join an organization that's open, that's diverse, that respects different viewpoints and perspectives, and it's a top reason why people select our company to join and to become part of the leadership team. Great,
Adam. I know your perspective's different.
Thank you. Yeah, it's quite different. So I've been in the construction industry, as you mentioned, for over 25 years. An entrepreneur, a South Florida business owner, and the construction industry, as you know, is a male-dominated field, kind of a legacy industry, very slow to evolve in technology and many things. So you might have remembered we had a little bit, like in 2009, the industry changed a little bit. Some of you may remember. It was awesome. But right, I'm sure. But so the industry is changing. I've seen it slowly evolve, and we started, as you mentioned, another portion of our business, which is more focused on maybe a higher level of the business. Our construction company does have maybe more men, but our other management portion, when I started preparing for the panel and looking around, it's a much more women dominated part of our business. Our executive team is more than 60% women, and most of our higher paid employees are women. And it's a very tight labor market. It's hard to find good people. And if you don't have, it's just basically a meritocracy. I mean, you're looking for the best people all the time. And if you start to put restrictions on who those people are in any way, you're not going to have the best people. And then once you do have those people, it's so hard to keep them that you need to go out of your way to create a culture that's inclusive and that people want to be a part of. So it's kind of just happened organically. And so it's been interesting to see the industry evolve overall, not just in our business. We see it kind of throughout the industry. There's far more women in the construction field than we've ever seen before, and in leadership positions. So it's been interesting, certainly over the last 20 years, to see how things have evolved.
Great. Nicole?
Well, in my case, it's quite different because we own a model agency. And we also own an event management company for the luxury market. So when it comes to the model agency, a topless man and a topless woman are two different things. You want to have a topless man, and sometimes, depending on the job, you need a topless woman. And if a photographer gives you a compliment or says something that has to do with your anatomy, that's actually accepted in the business. Within our office environment, believe it or not, there are no men who work in our office and hire mostly women. It's just the nature of the business. Now, on the event management side, we produce events for clients from over 10 countries. I didn't mention earlier, but we have been in business for 18 years, and we have models in 4 cities. And what we find is that depending on the culture of the client and what country they're coming from, their approach to the events, especially when the events entail models, is very different. If you have a Middle Eastern client versus a Latin client versus an American client versus a British client, you'll be surprised. It's quite different. So we have actually had to succumb a lot to inequality just because of the cultures and mindsets that come from these different countries and the clients that we deal with. And it's what we've had to do in order to close deals, unfortunately. Will that change? Not unless you start early with education and having girls and boys feel confident in being able to command certain salaries and be bold enough to expect certain things that traditionally might not have been expected of them, like our Middle Eastern clients. Of course, I'm sure you're quite aware that there was a big disequilibrium between how men and women are treated. But in order to change that, you would have to literally almost change a religion, a culture, the education. You'd have to start very early, and it's not an overnight process. So for us, because of the nature of our business, there is it's a longer and more difficult road, and some of the things that you may not accept in a more conventional style business like a bank or a law firm, you would accept in a model agency or an event management company where fashion and luxury are at the helm of our processes. But I have to say thank you to you. I know that obviously harassment is not something that we want to encourage, but if I am having a bad day and I walk next to a construction site, I am happy by the time I've left that construction site because they harass me and I love it. So thank you for whatever it is you're doing. Sometimes the divide and the disequilibrium actually works because I think that starving energy that they have, you know, every time they see a woman, they're like, no matter what she looks like, they compliment her. So I can't complain about the construction industry at all.
Unbeknownst to Adam, the gift that he's giving.
That's my 2 cents. I'm sorry.
That's wonderful. Joanna.
That's so interesting. I wonder if you have a policy for the construction guys on that.
You do, actually.
Yeah.
Oh, well, don't implement it.
The lawyers are happy to hear the policy.
So,
Not for the pedestrians, at
that's
least,
funny,
please.
yeah. So coming from education and technology, we love to be very data-driven. And you know, when you ask the question for me, like the first thing that comes to mind is the numbers. So 47% of the workforce is female, and yet we still see in many industries, we don't see that even divide. Women are still earning 79 cents on the dollar to a man. So if it's a hot topic, I'd say yes. I think once we get to equality, it won't be. That's still a big gap to be bridging. And the other thing that's really interesting is right now for me, and obviously I'm very biased, I really don't see any business as a non-tech business. I really see every business as a tech business. And you know, if you're not thinking like that, we should talk afterwards. And technology skill set happens to be something that is really lacking in diversity. And to really power your business today and do well as a business, you really have to think about what your technology talent looks like. So there's a huge opportunity right now to bring in more diversity. And there's a few reasons. One is simple, men and women are equal, right? So that's a simple argument to make as well. But the second is that it's statistically proven that diverse teams build better products and provide better service. So if not for anything else, it's a really smart business decision to have a diverse team. The other thing that's interesting is Deloitte had a study that came out that said 85% of household buying decisions are made by a female. So doesn't it make sense that the people who are creating the products and providing the services are more representative of the end user? Absolutely. You are definitely going to be a better business and make more money if that's the team that you have. And you know, lastly, diversity brings more, you know, diversity of thought brings better perspective and makes all of us more intelligent. So for me, it's a no-brainer, but we're also still at a process where in technology, for example, computer science degrees are, you know, anywhere from 8 to 12% female. So even if we wanted to wave a magic wand and have 50-50 representation in technology, it starts with education. We have a longer road. Like, I am not unrealistic. I know that it's going to take some time to get there. And so it is important that we start with role models and encouraging women to get into industries that aren't typically thought of female industries. And so I think we'll get more into that throughout the panel. But yeah, absolutely.
And Donna, you've got a long and storied career. So what are your thoughts?
Yes, thank you. Am I on? Okay. Well, first of all, similar to Nicole, you know, the fashion industry is predominantly a female industry. So coming up through the business, you know, I was always surrounded by female role models from my very, very first job, where I worked for an absolutely incredible woman that started her career at 16 in the stockroom and worked her way up to president of the company with no limitations. And, you know, even as a child growing up, my best friends were 3 boys that lived next door to me. So I was always equal. I never saw it any differently. But fascinatingly enough, even in the industry back a number of years ago, which has changed, the first time I faced it is actually when I had a child. And then all of a sudden, being a woman made a difference. And actually was working for a woman who had no children, and very verbally let me know that my decisions around being a mother were going to impact my career. I'm sure she didn't have that same conversation with any of the men that worked in the company that had children. And it was the first time I faced that, and that was a hard reality. But for me, something that I knew I was going to have to role model very differently for the young women that were going to come up underneath me. And as the years have gone by, one of the things I really have to say about working for Chico's, because White House was a subsidiary of Chico's FAS on the West Coast, is that we did such a phenomenal job supporting the women and supporting their careers. And when we opened a child care center on our campus, which completely eliminated the stress and gave these women flexibility, it was a game changer. And it was a game changer for keeping talent and recruiting talent. But it is a hot button. And, you know, I still believe that even in our industry, besides the models and everything that Nicole spoke about, which I won't repeat, I do believe that women face this. You know, the decisions, the women have to make choices. And I have many friends in the industry and a lot of young women that I have mentored through the years that have left, you know, my leadership and have gone on and struggle. And they call me all the time, and how did you manage being a mother and having a career? And isn't that a terrible conversation to be having in this day and age? So I still believe it is a significant issue for women, and that creates the imbalance, whether we want to face it or not. I mean, we can talk about gender equality, we can talk about all the news in the press, and I do believe even in an industry where the C-suite is predominant, I mean, it is one of the industries that actually retail, you know, the C-suite being female, it's one of the highest percentages in the industry, of industries, but it still exists. And, you know, so yes, it is a hot button, but I think the only way you change that is we have to role model that. So we have conversations, but we have to live it.
Great. So I'm going to circle the question back to Jose, which is my next question, which is, and Donna just mentioned the press and the media. You know, I'm a part of that. But Jose, Me Too era, Time's Up era, for those of us that are running a big business, small business, has that impacted the way that your workplace has addressed the concept of gender equality? Has it made you hypersensitive? Has it made you worried? I mean, what has the impact been on your particular workplace vis-a-vis gender equality?
Well, it's interesting because we have a pretty diverse organization, especially when it comes to our field team. So we have a corporate office and we have folks that manage our franchise businesses in the field, and a lot of our field teams that have come up through the ranks are women. And one of the conversations that I had recently with our team, folks that are in the field, is a concern, not because anything's happened, but you know, a concern around putting themselves in an awkward situation with for example, with our franchise partners that are predominantly you know, more senior and more male in many cases. And so a lot of times the role of managing a franchisee requires not just to be in the restaurants, not just to be in business reviews, but also to maintain relationships. You go out to dinner, sometimes you'll have drinks. And you know, one of the things that I think it's become more sensitive and more prevalent given the discussions on Me Too and others is you need to put yourself in the right situation. I think you know, it's as a business person, as a leader, it's important to build relationships, build trusting relationships, but don't put yourself in a situation where you feel uncomfortable. That you don't need to spend time at dinner or having drinks late at night with a franchisee or whoever or a supplier, whatever the case may be, in order to get the results of the business. You need to build a relationship, build that trusting relationship, but do it in a way where you feel comfortable. So it's become a topic that has raised some concerns and issues in the business, but I think being able to talk openly, transparently about it, and being able to address the concerns directly has been helpful for us.
Great. Adam, historically, traditionally male-dominated field of construction, is that an issue? The Me Too, Time's Up movement, is that something that has actually been a top-of-mind issue for you, having to run your business and that you've seen in your space?
First of all, I think it's a great conversation just to be having, even the fact that we're talking about it here today, just to bring it out in the open and just for people to address this openly, because it's always existed, but now we're actually talking about it. And I think what it does create is, in your business, you evolve, and maybe you become a parent or you perceive things differently. And you have, I think, a greater responsibility as a leader, as a parent, to set the tone of the culture that goes on in your organization. And just not laughing at certain jokes or not accepting certain things as they go on, and just make you more conscious of the tone that you set. So even just creating a zero tolerance policy within the organization. So we've had conversations actually internally, just, you know, with different ages of men and women, and just, you know, what's appropriate, what's not, and they've been really healthy. Even things, even to me, where you didn't perceive things maybe as being insensitive, and when it's brought up to you that way, the next time it comes up, you can pretty much, cut it. And earlier in my career, being younger as a business owner in the construction field, I was always shocked at some of the things that people would say to me or in front of me that, like, why would anybody think that that's appropriate to say? And as I've gotten older, I've lost tolerance for it. And I think as you set that, set that tone as a leader, it kind of, drives the culture for the rest of your organization.
Great, Adam. So, Johanna, I wanted to switch gears a little bit now and ask you a question, especially in the area that you're in. Do you think millennials, and by the way, I'm too old to be too young to be a certain generation and too old to be a millennial. So, but I'm aging really well because I got good genes from my mom, the good Asian genes. So, Johanna, do you feel that millennials are moving the needle in terms of helping achieve gender equality in the workplace, especially in light of the space that you're in?
So that's a tough question because we haven't seen the results yet. I would say that they're definitely vocal, and I like that. I mean, just it kind of still ties into the Me Too movement, but I think it's amazing. I think it's so amazing. I think that it's important that the young workforce coming in and the millennials coming in, that it is so important for them. Jose mentioned how important that is for people coming into the company, that they want to be part of company that's open-minded and diverse and cares about these things that they care about as well. I think that's super, super important. But I also, what I love about the Me Too movement is, just to give a personal example, my background's in corporate management. I worked at the National Hockey League for a decade, and I left as the highest ranking female manager in operations. It was me and 85 guys in my department. So I know all about the old boys club, and I love those guys, and I loved my career there, and I had a lot of support. But someone who's very high ranking in that organization and still there and very well known by anyone who follows hockey, just after I got married, which was now a long time ago, he sat me down, and I was on an upward trajectory in corporate, and he said, "Joe, I really value you and I care about you, and so I want to level with you and be honest. Usually when women get married, the next thing you do is get pregnant. If you get pregnant right now, that's really going to slow down what's happening with your career." And at the time, my first, I know there might be a lot of lawyers in the room, so you're like, oh, that's not okay. But my initial reaction at the time as like a 20-something was deep gratitude, right? Here was someone who was very senior in an organization, a man who was like, listen, I got your back, you're gonna do well, but if you get pregnant, that all ends, right? And so what I would say is at the time, there was no Me Too movement, right? So I didn't even have the perspective to think about it in any other way other than I did at the time. And what I love now is that, we haven't seen enough move, and the needle hasn't moved enough. So I think there's a lot more work to be done. But the fact is we are in the awareness stage and we are talking about it, and that's really, really important. Another thing that's really interesting about what Jose said is, they are, it's such an important core value to the company, which is super important, but they still need to have conversations with their employees to be like, don't put yourself in a situation where something bad could happen. I mean, we need to get to a point one day where you don't have to have that conversation because the onus on being appropriate is equally weighted on both people in the scenario, right? So I think, here's to the millennials, but I think the people, this is still very much a top-down thing. I think most of the change will come from top-down right now.
So, Nicole, I would make a generalization that perhaps your workplace is also driven by maybe the younger kind of crowd. Have you had experience with millennials? Have they enhanced the concept of gender equality in the particular area that you're working in?
Well, again, in fashion, specifically in a model agency, it's very different. Here's how we approach this situation. We have a core culture in our business here in the US. But again, what is accepted here versus what is accepted if we're doing a job in the Caribbean or if we're doing a job in Europe or Eastern Europe versus Western Europe, Middle East, wherever it is, it does change. So while, let's say we have a policy that models should not drink, whether it's a model server or a model on a photo shoot, they should not consume alcohol during the job. That particular rule, that stands globally. But there may be some other rules where, let's say after a photo shoot, we do not encourage models to spend additional time with photographers and clients because they may want to go, I don't know, back to somebody's home or whatever it is, and things may take a different direction. But in certain other cultures, if you don't spend that extra time with the client, it's considered rude. So while we do have a core culture of things, of rules and regulations that we find to be beneficial to stick to, when you are in a different environment, when in Rome, do as the Romans do. I hate to put it that way, but in order for us to do business globally, sometimes we have to digress slightly from our core rules that are implemented more stringently in this particular US environment, if that makes sense. So they have embraced it. There's increased awareness, absolutely. We were a little bit more, I would admit, lenient because of the kind of business that we're in. We didn't really have a core structure and culture of rules and regulations, but we had to implement that because you never know. You know, we haven't had any situations come up thus far, not in 18 years, but because it is a hot button topic now, the probability of something happening is greater now. So we had to have that culture in place so that no one can say we didn't have it in writing and everybody has signed and agreed to adhere to those.
Some of it is also, so what we're doing is we're really working to help educate companies, not only on what lenses to use to identify talent, but also how to think about how they've operated before and maybe thinking about how to update them now. And that's a really tricky question. But I just also wanted to share, because I don't have a solution for this, and so it's just interesting to pose it. You know, the other day, we had a situation where a gentleman from Russia was behaving a certain way, and I had to have a meeting with him afterwards to say, hey, your comments were not appropriate. You cannot speak about women like that. And he was like, give me a break. Women are second-class citizens in Russia. It's just my culture. And he's an American, right? And so it was just a really interesting conversation because I get it, there is some of that perspective, but it's so important we talk about this. And at the end of the conversation, he was like, you know, I do appreciate you bringing this to me. It has made me think about it. You know, because you cannot just default to, well, it's okay it's okay there, or it's okay here, or I do it because of. To me, that's just an excuse.
Well, hopefully he didn't say, thank you for bringing that to my attention, bring me my coffee. Hopefully that's not what he said at the end of that
No,
Actually,
enlightening conversation.
If I could jump in on that, I think Joe raises an interesting point. We're a global company, and we spend probably close to $500 million a year in marketing around the world. And we control, obviously, we're very close and control the U.S. marketing, but we have a franchise team that manages Russia and China and Thailand. So there's a team in every market, and they kind of have a different perspective on communication, what works in their particular markets. And so recently, probably in the last couple of years, we've had a significant issue come up in a few markets, Russia being one that crosses cultures and different perspectives. You have to understand the world that you live in, but you also have to stand for something. You have to have a viewpoint on things. And we've taken a position on this globally because it's important for the brand and important for us and important for the teams that we have, including the many young women that are joining our teams from universities that look at us and say, look, if you're saying you want to be a diverse organization, you say you have a viewpoint on this, but then you let the marketing teams in Russia or elsewhere talk about women this way, it's really not an acceptable way to look at it. So I think it's an important point and an important topic to address.
Absolutely, and I'm glad you mentioned Russia because we do a lot of work with Russian clients. And to be honest, there are some Russian clients that are very traditional and they will not want to do business with a woman, especially a minority woman. When they see me, they would never believe that I'm the owner of the company. And that's actually, I mean, I know you would say, oh, how could you say this? But I'm okay with that. I've accepted that. I'm not going to change anytime soon. So if I have to send Joe in my place, that's what I do. And if I am standing in the room during the event and they don't know I'm the owner, I'm fine with that. As long as the check clears, that's fine. That's absolutely fine. I have no ego when it comes to that. We serve them on their terms. However, there is a line. There is a line, of course. If they were to disrespect me, then, okay, I wouldn't see what would happen, but yes, of course. We'd see a different, less British side.
So Donna, Jose talked about saying no, right? And setting the tone. We've heard a lot actually in the news and the media these days about setting the tone at the very top, and how does that filter down. You serve on boards, boards of major companies that are traditionally older and male. So how do you set the tone, send a message, maybe even move that needle we talked about, maybe the millennials doing? How do you do that from your role on a board, and how were you able to achieve that when you were basically running these major companies?
That's a very good question. You know, boards are, I've been sort of fighting this battle since I've been independent. And I have come to learn, because, you know, I approach everything I do. I don't really see obstacles. I always see opportunity. It's just the nature of how I work. But boards are, quite frankly, white-haired men. And to break through that is incredibly, incredibly difficult. You know, the board I serve on, I am the only woman on the board. And I'm very grateful to the organization that owns the company that got me involved on the board, because they are quite forward-thinking, and but yet their boards are predominantly men. And it is extremely difficult to break through, and it's not something that I feel good, comfortable, or can accept. I've actually used this time to network with some very powerful business women, and get involved with how we are going to begin to break through those barriers, and how we get placements on board so our voice is heard. You know, what California did is, you know, absolutely, you know, I commend them for that move. But I'm saddened by the fact that they had to do that, or that we would have to do that. And that we are not empowered enough as a culture to say every person, regardless of gender, regardless of race, regardless of socioeconomic background, that everyone is empowered to reach their full potential. So while I can applaud it, it saddens me on another side. When I led my organization, the 10 plus years I was there leading them, as I said, it's always easier when you're in a business that is predominantly female, which also then puts a little bit of strain on the other side. Because when you work in an organization and you are the minority being male, which in that organization you were, and even at the top, even at the executive level, we were all women. At the executive level, and we have a very, very well balanced board, actually. So very fortunate. But again, I go back to, you know, I want to sort of flip this back to the younger generation, because I mentioned earlier, for me, what was the most important was becoming the role model. And being the role model meant constantly opening up conversation and dialogue, allowing that empowerment to shine through the organization so that everyone felt, again, you know, diversity, we can say diversity, we can call it gender equality, but it really, for me, was about empowering an entire organization of people, regardless, that they could reach their full potential. And it didn't matter whether they had children, didn't have children, married, not married, none of that really mattered when they walked through the doors of our building, because everyone had the opportunity to grow and be recognized. And I think the millennials, if I can just spin back to that a second, is an interesting conversation, because I have raised one, and we have raised this generation to see no differences. I mean, really, it is just such an amazing thing, because regardless, you know, when I was brought up, not any ill intent, there were differences. You know, my mom stayed home, my dad went out to work, you lived in neighborhoods that tended to be like you, and you didn't move into areas that weren't. I mean, just not for anything other than it was just the way my parents were raised. So we raised this generation to see no difference. And the fact that, you know, the platform of Me Too, what that has opened up is their voice even louder than their voice was. And I think that is something that we as leaders, and even though I'm not currently in a large corporation, we have to give them that voice. And, one of the things that I did on a regular basis that I think was extraordinarily helpful was I would hold things I call coffee talks. And I would pull together no more than 8 to 10 people in my organization, because more than that then generally cuts down the dialogue. And we would talk about the most relevant current facts and what was going on in the world, how it impacted them, and how we can make a difference in our corporation to affect that. And I found it extremely helpful to really understand what was on their mind, but also open up a platform that was of equal opportunity for everybody in the business.
Yeah. Oh, sure. Well, you get the honor. This is your show.
No, a couple of you have commented on something that I think is really pertinent, and I applaud you, Jose, for taking a stance, and Joe, you same thing. But I think that I'm curious how the panelists deal with that difficult situation where maybe it's a client or somebody who is important to your business, and they've said something that Adam commented, "Don't laugh at the joke." And I think that's a great start, but how do you take it to that next step of having that conversation? I think, Joe, you said you took them aside afterward. So how have you dealt with those situations where you've seen something that you're not going to just call someone out in a room full of people, and maybe you're not the CEO. It's different when you're the CEO and you can have that conversation. But how do people who are not the CEO or who are kind of beholden to, maybe it's a client who says something inappropriate or whatever? I'm just curious how you've dealt with difficult situations, that the uncomfortable conversations.
Look, I've had situations where people, and I think it really, in my scenario, I've tried to establish a kind of an open door in my organization, in our team, so that there's certain things that we're trying to create a company that's best in class, and to do that you have to have, you talked about values and culture earlier today, you have to have that really clear for the organization and for your team, and you have to be able to open the door, whether it's through coffee talks or just making it clear that you don't tolerate certain things. I've had situations where people have come to me and said, "Look, this happened. I don't feel comfortable talking to this person about it because they're senior to me," and you just need to deal with it immediately. You don't go to. In my case, I've heard people say, "Oh, you got to go talk to HR and you got to go, follow the right process." Pardon my French, but I think that's bullshit. I think you need to go deal with it right away. And so I've had, whenever something has come up to me that is unacceptable, whether it's gender related, ethnicity, or just bad behavior, deal with it right away. Talk to the person, explain that it's not acceptable, show that it really is a problem, and that if it's happened 1 or 2 times, then that person's not the right person for your organization, and deal with it. If it's the first time, make it clear. And I think the tone from the top and how you handle that without tolerance is the most important thing to do. I think later you can have, if you have a client that pays you a lot of money and is a big part of your business, I think you need to think through whether that's the right type of client that you want long term. And those are tougher decisions for sure. I mean, in the case of one of our franchisees, we actually sent them a notice of termination to terminate their franchise agreements, which is a lot of money for our business. But it's the right thing to do to establish the right tone with those guys for the long term. Otherwise, it's going to be very difficult to have an organization that you can be proud of, and it's hard to build a company that's going to be best in class when you can't be proud of the things you do.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, and also what you're saying is, I'm not there to tear anyone down because they made an inappropriate comment. I think it's about being open-minded to sharing perspective. And so we are in a time of transition. So I try to approach those conversations as educational for both sides. So, I take people aside and I say, I just want to find out where you are coming from and just share my perspective of why that might have been inappropriate or uncomfortable, and what are your thoughts and what made you say that. And it's, this is very behavioral and psychological. So changing very deeply rooted thoughts and beliefs and feelings takes a long time. So sometimes that's just the initial conversation to plant the seed to get people to think about it and maybe behave differently the next time around. We do hear about this a lot. So we're placing tech talent with companies primarily in South Florida. And the way that we hear about it is primarily through female developers who have joined a tech team, and they're the first female developer on the team. And the team behaves a certain way that they didn't, in some cases, they didn't even realize was inappropriate because now they have a female on the team. And so they have come to us a lot of times just to empower individuals, like how do you bring it up? I'm totally with Jose. I think this stuff needs to be addressed right as it happens. Don't let it fester. Say like addressing it immediately is great because, you know, you talk about it in a conversation rather than, you know, 10 incidents later and it's a total blow up. Right? So oftentimes good people approach it with integrity to get integrity back. When you don't get that, then it's a different conversation, right?
Yeah, we have, you know, in our industry, we have a lot of gay men that work with us. And actually, this happened very recently before I left. Was, you know, we had a gentleman who'd been with us for quite some time, quite flamboyant with the way he dressed, a little avant-garde, and. You know, it was funny because it was always sort of like I would sort of pick up on these undertones of commentary from people. Well, I got to the point where, you know, quite frankly, you know, somebody just blurted out really the most inappropriate comment about his dress. And, you know, and he was, and rightfully so, incredibly hurt by the comment. And, you know, it was the first time I had actually faced something like that, right? It's like the whole thing's flipped around. And I thought about it. And, you know, the HR, while HR is there to help and support, I think it also creates a shield for the leader in the organization if you don't address it head on. And I pulled the person aside that made the comment. And I actually went back and pulled the entire team together. And we talked about, not him in particular, but we talked about diversity. And then I empowered and charged my direct reports for holding sessions with their teams to really talk about it, because we were a melting pot of people. And it was quite staggering to me because I never really thought about it. He was expressing himself the same way, you know, I wear pearls, that's my expression. You know, I wouldn't think anyone would insult that. But I do feel as though, you know, hiding behind the human resources department, while they're there to support you and at times they need to be involved, I think it takes away from our credibility as leaders and our authenticity as leaders if we don't address things head on. And I think that needs to be very visible. Nicole?
Just a really quick comment. So again, I consider my industry to be very interesting, just like with some of the comments that you're making. We work a lot with Chinese clients as well. And I remember a couple of years ago, we had models that were hired to hand over contracts between the Bank of China to the Bahamar project, the hotel project. Now you'd wonder, why would you need models to hand over a contract? But it was an event at the Mandarin Oriental, and they needed blonde models, 5'10" and above, to hand over the contracts. Now, what could we say to the clients? Oh, why don't you put a black model in there? Why don't you put a Latin model? We are in Miami. They know what works for their business. We just had a recent client from China as well say we want to do a beauty pageant here, and we want to hire X, Y, and Z, but we need to have female blonde models because the male investors that are coming in are not going to want to look at other men or black women or Latin women. They want blonde models. Now, on the flip side, like you were saying, if a client makes a comment, let's say, oh, I don't want to have a black model. Sometimes we'll say to them, listen, we are in a different time now, and if you are going to be advertising here in the US, it might be prudent to embrace diversity. Here are examples of other businesses similar to yours who've used a Latin model, a black model, a Caucasian model, and here are some of the numbers that have changed or augmented in their favor as a result of them embracing what is more commonplace and effective in this environment in this current day. So sometimes it requires us to educate the client, and other times, as I probably said earlier, I'm probably beginning to sound redundant, it requires us to comply.
Got it. So Adam, you've built a business from ground up, right? And most of the people here are either in the business of law, because we have to be reminded, right? It's the business of law, or you're running a business or you're a part of a business. And so you have, you know, measurable metrics that need to be met. So there's this concept of unconscious bias or gender bias. And I'm going to read the definition for those of you that don't know what unconscious biases are. Those are social stereotypes about certain groups of people that individuals form outside their conscious awareness. It occurs automatically and is triggered by our brain making quick judgments. So some of the adjustments that have been made by perhaps people in HR are remote working from home or accommodations for working mothers, etc. How do you reconcile that? You need to make money, you need to run a business. How do you reconcile trying to adjust to the unconscious biases that may exist about mothers and people of other genders or ethnicities? How do you deal with that, especially from having to run a business and make some money?
So our business has grown very fast. We've doubled in size really the last couple of years. So we're constantly looking for the best people. And if you don't remain at least innovative and aware of what else is happening. I mean, I've taken trips out to California the last couple of years to see what business. I don't know if any of you have ever read. There's a book that Patty McCord wrote out of the Netflix. Their culture suite. It's one of the most recognized HR groups out of Silicon Valley. And their approach is a little bit different. They say it's a lot of businesses say, oh, we're a family. Their philosophy is we're not a family, we're a team. And in a team, you have a responsibility to put the best players in the best positions at all times. And as you're growing a business, you constantly are always looking for the best people. And sometimes the people you bring in may replace those other people. And if you don't have a bias at all, you're going to find the best people, men, women, regardless of age. And as we mentioned before, we talked about technology. There's kind of I'm 46, and it's kind of like if you're maybe. We look at it like if we're older than me, you may have one view in technology, and the younger people. I mean, we talked about millennials. I'm a huge fan of millennials, although there's a little bit of complications. But they understand the technology, the way they communicate, and it's just the way that business is done. It's much more. It's much faster. They communicate faster. And the only thing they lack is experience. And so as they grow, they're going to get it. And then the people who don't, have that, the older generation, they're going to get pushed out. But I think you need to be flexible with that in understanding how they perform best. If they want to work from home, work from home. I don't care, just perform. Keep the clients happy. Why would we care if you're performing? You start to create all these rules, and that's how you need to evolve as a business, especially in a growing business. And we don't have, I'm sure you have a lot of people in your HR department. When you're building an airplane in the air, you may not have it. And you don't have that shield of an HR that you have to go behind. You're forced to kind of deal with those things. And the only way to deal with it, the best way to deal with it, is to have the best people all the time. And then you need less rules and structure. The more mediocre your people are, the more structure and rules you need around those people. So if you're really strict in your hiring, and I think Brett and Jeff talked about the people they bring on and the culture they're trying to create, that's what gets you the best organization. So I don't know if that answers.
Jose, was there a question? So Jose, we also kind of traditionally go to the concept of gender equality as a male-female concept. How about LGBTQ? Is that something that you guys are trying to stay in front of in terms of trying to make it an inviting workplace environment so that you can actually even further enhance and diversify what you have in terms of productive workforce?
Well, our focus is diversity, is to have as he mentioned, having the best organization, it starts with having the best people, having the best team, and to the extent you put any limitations or any restrictions on that, and to the extent you don't create the right type of environment that invites a diverse group of people, it's going to limit your ability to attract the best talent, and that's what's going to make a difference in any organization. And we believe it's the most important factor in the progress we've made as a business over the last 6-7 years has been the great people that we've been able to bring into the organization. I think from our vantage point, the way we look at it is, it starts with recruitment. You have to have a broad base of talented people coming in, diverse group of folks to come in, so that that's what ultimately is going to lead to the top, right? You don't go out and hire. I don't believe in going out to hire men, women, minorities simply to address a gap that you may have in diversity. You need to start with a really good bench, with a clear view of what it is that what the type of folks you want, what type of educational background you want, what type of analytical skills you want, what type of mindset that they have. You need to start right at the beginning, and we spent a lot of time on that recruiting. But then you also have to have the right training in-house, technical training, soft skill training. We spend quite a bit of time over the last few years training on subconscious bias as well, to make sure that people understand it, right, or aware of it. I think the most important issue is being self-aware and understanding. So if you're really good and want to be part of a winning team and organization, if you're aware of it and you're aware that it's an issue, you'll tackle it, you'll address it. So training is very important. And then one other thing that we've found over the last, and I found in particular over the last couple of years, is networking, an informal networking process. I've found young, up and coming male talent in the organization to be a little more, at times, a little more aggressive and forward in terms of reaching out to senior management. I get approached more often by young men in the organization saying, "Hey, can we have a coffee? I want to learn about your background, your career, what you did, what steps you took to get to where you are." It happens more often that men do that versus women, and so we've created a women's leadership forum in the organization that was started by some of the young women executives in the team, to be able to give women an opportunity to informally network with senior leaders, to be able to break the ice and feel more comfortable about approaching us and saying, "Hey, look, I want to get to your level. I want to be able to run the company, or I want to run a region in the company. What do I need to do? What are the things I need what are the steps I need to take to get there?" So I think it's not just one thing. I think it starts with the tone at the top, but you've got to put actionable measures in place to be able to create the type of environment and the type of culture you want to create in the organization.
So we have just a few minutes left, and I wanted to open it up to any questions that the audience might have. Can I get a mic to her, please?
She's pretty loud. Go for it. Go for it. She's loud.
I have a question. So I, went into business in the late 80s. Right? I had a computer science degree. Then I entered the healthcare field, which is still predominantly male. And I feel I would have never gotten to where I've gotten. So my question is, do you feel that this hypersensitivity is hurting women advancing in business?
So I don't think being sensitive or not sensitive should affect your career trajectory, right? So I think that's like the easy answer. I can tell you right now, coming up in the NHL, I was not sensitive. And I knew that I wanted to put my head down and prove myself through work, not through, "Hey, I'm the woman, why aren't you treating me better?" So I totally understand what you're saying, but I think what's happened now with this increased perspective and conversation and dialogue is to be that the people who do feel uncomfortable should be allowed to say that they feel uncomfortable, because in some way it's hindering their advancement and we don't even know it. And I think there's also other things that are important. So, you talked about how, for your kids and for millennials, they see everything as equal. Well, it's amazing to hear all the things that Burger King's doing, but it is still really important for us to think about how we run our businesses, from things like even changing maternity leave to paternity leave. That's like a small thing where they might see one another as equals, but in some career paths, if there's only maternity leave and only the female takes the time off and pauses their career, it might hurt them despite how they feel about each other, right? So I do think there are systemic things that we need to change in order to make sure that people are okay. And maybe people are more sensitive to, I do need the time off, or I don't, whatever it is, right? So, to be open to different levels of sensitivity. So I think being sensitive, you could get targeted as you're being such a female, and I don't think that's appropriate. So that would be my baseline. I've definitely seen it harm people.
Other questions?
Hi, so I have shared a lot of experiences with you all on stage, which is, growing up in Chicago in a neighborhood with all boys, Irish, Italian, there's every household had, 3 to 6 kids. And my sister and I were the only females in probably a 5-block radius. So I never really saw a difference there. And then, I went to college, and my professor had said to me in my senior year, who was a very good mentor to me, please don't get married and have children right away. You are going to be extremely successful. and I would hate to see you ruin your career that way. So I took his advice, and I didn't think anything of it. I thought of it as great advice. And then I was at JP Morgan, and I was the art director there in my mid-20s and head of compliance and liaison between New York and Chicago. And I had the opportunity to attend a business women's forum, and the topic was gender equality. And the one thing that kept coming up was not the obvious, which was it was the unconscious. You know, it was the one thing. And my question is here is, you know, advice for this. So if there's a female and a male, and they're pitching a project or an idea, the women, even with data, could have the best idea, and she could back it up, and the male cannot. They will choose his idea over hers, and this happens over and over. And if you go to that man and said, after, let's say it flopped, why did you choose this idea? They're not going to sit there and say, because you're a female, I didn't choose you. They're going to come up with another idea. So how do you handle situations like that where, you know, even with backing with data and everything else, that your, you know, pitch might be better for them, and it doesn't turn out that way? Wow.
Great. Look, I think the question is really about the quality of the work, right? If you're talking to someone who's so kind of bullheaded that they don't care what information you share with them, they don't care about the analytics, they don't care about the path you took to solve their problem and give them a solution, then I really don't have an answer to that other than to say, wow. You know, I think what I would always do is, you know, try to figure out what you control. So how good, if you're the woman in that scenario and you presented something that you thought was really good, and that you think the other person got won the pitch or sold the idea because they're a man, I think you need to go back and figure out, did I really do the best job I could to get that pitch across, right? If you start looking at it, and it doesn't, this is a kind of a gender neutral comment, but if you look at things as a victim, you look at things as, you know, hey, I did a great job, I did everything I could, but the other person won because of what school they went to, you know, how tall they are, how good they look versus me, then you're done, right? You can't control your outcomes, and you can't control your destiny if you depend on other people's perspectives and kind of biases. So I think the feedback and the guidance and the advice I'd give anyone who's in that scenario who views it that way, I'd say, listen, what could you have done better to win that pitch, right? What did you have any issues with the quality of your message? Did you make the connection? Did you find a way to connect with this, you know, bullheaded person that didn't understand what you were saying? I mean, I think if you look at it as a victim, it's really hard to come back from that. So I think that's advice I'd give to anybody on any topic where they look at the other person or the scenarios outside of their control and say, hey, you know, I lost because this person, you know, likes the way you look better than the way I look. I think that's a tough thing to overcome.
And just really quickly on that, statistically it's shown that women use words like we can, we did this together, like collaborative group team effort things. In interviews in particular, men are often hired over women in really competitive positions because of how the men talk about themselves versus how women talk. Women tend to give credit to everyone, and men tend to not give credit. Sorry, guys. And so it makes it seem more attractive and more confident. So I think as women, let's all think, I always try to think about this. How am I presenting a concept or a pitch?
Yeah, I honestly think, to what José said, you need to focus on you. Do the very best you can, and someone out there in the group will hire you or will book you, or whatever it is. Book is a term we use in the model agency business for hiring. But it's not really about the other person, it's about you being able to deliver the best that you can be. I noticed, for example, in the real estate market, like for some of the luxury events that we do, I mean, from the days when my mom owned a real estate company, I mean, she brought Remax to St. Lucia in the Caribbean, which is originally where I was born. And so I saw her as a very strong woman in real estate, and she came from banking, and she was sitting on boards. I mean, very powerful woman, along with my dad, who was also a very powerful individual. But here now, like traditionally in St. Lucia, a realtor is just a regular person, looks like anybody in the room. But here in Miami, I've seen so many models move into real estate, and some of them, I swear to God, I probably shouldn't say this out loud, but some of the realtors look like prostitutes. I mean, I look at them and I'm like, what is this? Breasts out to hair and short skirts. I mean, this is what you need to do to sell a property. But you know what? Yeah. Well, my mom is still a real estate broker, but she's a little more conservative. I mean, listen, I'm not judging. You can dress, however you want to, but it was an eye-opener for me that I thought, oh my goodness, this is what real estate is like today. And I showed my mom, I was like, Mom, this is probably why you don't sell some of those properties, because you're a little too conservative. But what I'm trying to say is that those biases, I don't think there's really anything that you can do about it. If you're the best realtor you can be or the best lawyer you can be, as long as your product is good, your delivery is good, there's always someone who's going to choose that. That's going to trump your physical attributes, I think. And there are people who are always going to be drawn to aesthetics no matter what you say. There are some people that'll hire a model no matter how dumb she is. And then there are other people, they really want intellect and eloquence and all those other things. So, or hire us to do an event no matter what I look like. And sometimes they don't ever get to meet me, which is great. I love being in the background. So just deliver your best and you'll be successful. I see it all the time on Bloomberg. They talk about men being dominant in certain areas, but I see so many powerful women in the finance industry, amazing, doing wonderful things. And a lot of them are very simple. Look at Angela Merkel. I mean, very simple. And look where she is. Look at Christine Lagarde. Very simple women, and look at where they are.
Quickly. Just very quickly, we talk about unconscious bias. I think sometimes as women, we go into situations with our own unconscious bias. And we go in with this sense of we are not going to be perceived at the same level as the man that we're going up against, or another person. It doesn't even have to be a man, right? It could be a woman. So I think that down deep, what we have to come to terms with, and sort of reinforcing the commentary is, we have to believe in ourselves. And we have to put our best self forward every time, in every situation. And that is what we can do. But I do think we often go in with that little bit of, we have this thing, and whether we realize it or not, that comes, that slight lack of confidence will come across in those types of circumstances. So I think we have to come to terms with ourselves as well as setting an example for what we want the rest of the world to see us as.
Just really, really quickly, I just want to give one more example because I am living proof of it. One of my biggest clients is the Indian Creek Country Club. I'm not sure if you know about the Indian Creek Country Club, but it is in Bal Harbour. Traditionally, very, very, conventional club. They used to have a sign between them and the surf club in Bal Harbour: no Jews, no blacks, and no dogs. And I am the exclusive event planner for all of the country club's members. And it's just because I never thought, I lived in St. Lucia, I lived in Denmark, I lived in Paris, I speak 7 languages, my husband's Italian. I never think about me being different. And if I do, I think that's great. I want to be the only person in the room. I want to be the token. I'm happy for that. And I have lots of clients who traditionally would not choose a boutique firm, and they do. And I show up and I'm different, and that works in my favor. So, because I do the best, and I don't think about, oh, I'm black, so they're not going to hire me. I'm a woman, so they're not going to hire me. I do the best. I give them my all, and somebody bites.
So on a closing note, I wanted to bring up Indra Nooyi. She just stepped down as the CEO of PepsiCo this past Tuesday. She increased revenue by 80% during her tenure at PepsiCo. But in her closing remarks, and this really kind of resonated with me when I read it this week, she expressed regrets at not spending more time with her children and her family, and said it's rarely possible to be the perfect mother, wife, and worker at the same time. She said building a network of support that we heard about this morning is key, and understanding that each choice we make is a sacrifice. She said, make the most of your days and make space